So, welcome. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه أن رجل قال للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أوصني، قال لا تغضب، فردد مرارا قال لا تغضب. رواه البخاري. It is narrated by Abu Huraira, may Allah be pleased with him, that a man came to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, "Give me advice." And so he said, "Do not become angry." And so he repeated himself, so like he said, "Give me another piece of advice." And he said, "Don't become angry." And this was narrated in Bukhari. And so if anyone needs to leave at any point, feel free to do so, inshallah. This lecture is based on a lecture given by Mufti Hussein Kamani on his podcast at Qalam. And so this is kind of one of those foundational hadith. Last week we mentioned that Ibn Abi Zayd said that there was 4 hadith that were kind of the foundations for good character. The one that we went over last week, whoever believes in Allah and the last day speak good or remain silent. There is the one that we also went over, that from the beauty or the excellence of one's faith is that someone leaves what does not concern him. There is one that we have not yet covered, which is none of you truly have attained faith, and so you love for your brother what you love for yourself. That'll come up in the future, inshallah. And then there's this 4th one, which is do not become angry. So it's kind of one of the foundational hadith on good character and etiquette. And it's a really small hadith, like really the hadith is really la taghdab, don't become angry. It's a very easy hadith to memorize, it's very memorable, but there's like a whole lifetime of lessons to be derived from this one hadith. And there's other variations of the hadith which either indicates that there's multiple incidents where the Prophet ﷺ advised people to not become angry, or that there was Sahaba that had different narrations. So other narrations you might hear, someone came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, teach me something, but don't make it too much so I can remember it or memorize it. And so then he said, La taghdab. And so that kind of shows us like this real authentic connection that a lot of people have with the Prophet ﷺ. They felt comfortable to just go up to him and say, give me something really short, simple, sweet, that I can memorize. And that's practical for most of the ummah, like that's what they need, is just really practical, simple advice to live on. And these little hadith, these like simple things is what made the Sahaba really great. Another narration is, guide me to an action which will lead me to Jannah, and don't make it too much for me. That was another narration, and the answer is also la taghdab. And so there's other, some people question like who the person who's asking the questions. There's no like strong answer. There's differences of opinions, like weak narrations. Some people say it's Abu Darda radiallahu anhu. Some say Sufyan bin Abdullah or Abdullah bin Amr. Like there's different names that scholars have tried to come up with. But the important point is that we don't even know the name of the man for sure. And it's kind of like symbolic that it's like really it's meant for all of us. It's a very general advice. It's not specific just to the man. And on that point, there's kind of 2 opinions also. Some people say that this advice was tailored to the person. So the Prophet ﷺ knew this person's weakness, and so he told him, don't become angry, because he knew he might become angry. Because there's other advice, like there's other hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, people come up to him and ask him for advice, and he says other things, like, there's other pieces of advice that he gives, or they say, what's the best action? He tells them other things. But then other people say, no, that this is actually general advice for everyone, don't become angry. So this is kind of like 2 different viewpoints. That's kind of the backdrop for this hadith. So to go into it now. Anger, why is this advice so important to all of us? The real thing is that anger is kind of one of the main sources for a lot of the evil or the prevention of a lot of good. There's like this kind of mentality that a lot of scholars have reflected on, where all bad, really, if you boil down like everything that we do that's sinful or prevents us from doing good, it really boils down to 2 main things. One is anger, and the other is desire. Most things can be categorized as either something that's desirable leads you to sin, or from anger leads you to sin. That's kind of like the main things. And so it's very, very important that we focus on this aspect. Like it's a huge, if we can work on just controlling our anger, then that's like a huge block for most of the sins in our life, inshallah. And of course, this kind of shows us the emphasis of character in the deen and how important it is that to get to Jannah, to work on improving ourselves. The big thing is working on our character, because it's a manifestation of our beliefs. So with that, as in like most things like in Arab tradition, when you're trying to understand something, it's important to start by understanding its opposite sometimes. And so here the word for anger is ghadab, and the opposite of that, scholars say, is rida, which is like pleasure, to be pleased with something. And so ghadab is the opposite of that, pleasure, to be pleased with something. It's become very angry with something, and different definitions people have given. Essentially, a summary of it is that it's a burst of fury in the heart with the intention of revenge. That's the Imam Raghib gives that definition. Imam al-Ghazali says it's a boiling of the heart and it starts with seeking revenge. So it's this idea of not just this like anger, but it's also you want to hurt somebody else or do something like that. So an example is maybe if you get fired or you don't get into a school or you get insulted, you want to go and you just want to get revenge from somebody. So that kind of feeling, that boiling feeling inside, that's what's meant by ghadab. And so usually involves losing control or violating someone else's right. So then this question comes up, is being angry always bad? And the answer is no, that Allah gave it to us for a reason, and it just needs to be mediated. So Ghazali, like many of the other hadith we've done before, does a great job of breaking things down into different levels. And so Ghazali defines 3 different kinds of anger, different kinds of reactions for anger. One is tafrit, then there's ifrat, and then there's i'tidal. So tafrit is like too little anger. It's like someone who's not angry, doesn't get angry enough. It's, for example, someone comes and violates your family's rights or, insults someone in your family, something like that, and you just take it passively. It's like, it's a kind of a sign of weakness as opposed to a sign of controlling your anger. So it's not going to be weak in the face of, when you should be defending yourself, defending your honor, the honor of your religion. It's very important to be able to defend yourself. And so it's not a call to weakness. This la taghdab is not a call to weakness. That's on one extreme. On the other extreme, so that was tafrit. The other extreme is ifrat, which is the opposite. It's too much anger. It's it's like poisonous. It's like when you're standing in line and someone starts cussing, like, oh, it's taking too long, or road rage, these kind of things. And those are inappropriate reactions. And so there's always this middle ground. Islam's the whole thing is about finding the middle ground in everything. And so the middle ground is like an appropriate anger that's balanced. And so there's it's important to be balanced in our anger and also in our love. And we're going to obviously focus on anger in this one, but there's amongst the most beloved deeds to Allah is the love for Allah's sake and also anger for Allah's sake. And so that's like one of the hadith that's very beautiful to reflect on. So the important thing is to put anger in its right place, but don't justify and feed it. So like when you do something, don't be like, oh yeah, I'm doing this for the right reasons. You have to really be intentional, because it's very easy to fall in this cycle where you get angry and then you try to justify, like, oh, I have the right to be angry and I should be angry and I can't be weak. So you have to really be reflective and honest with yourself and not just let yourself justify it. And so there's a lot of beautiful stories from the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ themselves. One of them is the story of Ali in war, for example. So there was a battle and he knocked a guy down and he got on top and he was going to end the man's life. He was going to kill the guy. And the man ended up spitting in his face. And Ali ended up actually just getting up and walking away. And the guy is sitting there like shocked. He's like, you were just about to kill me. What happened? He's like, you should have stabbed me like 30 times, not just 3 times. And Ali said, like, when I was originally going to kill you, it was because you were an enemy of the Prophet ﷺ and of Allah, and you were going to attack the messenger. So my intention is to defend the messenger of Allah and to defend Islam. So like that was my intention. When you spat in my face, I got angry, and I wanted to kill you just because you spat in my face, because you disrespected me. And he said that was not, I didn't want to kill you for that, because I'll be held accountable in Allah for that reason. So he literally walked away in the middle of a battle from that, which is like kind of an amazing example. He also says another very poetic thing, which is, the translation of it would be in kind of like going back to that moderation of both love and anger, is that when you love somebody, be cautious with how much you love them, because someone you might love now might turn on you later. And when you hate somebody, be cautious with how much you hate them, because they might become your friend later. And that's also a beautiful reflection from Ali. The Prophet ﷺ was also obviously an amazing example of how to have balanced anger in his life. The Prophet ﷺ himself got angry in certain situations. For example, there's a situation where the Sahabi, they complained that there's a Sahaba who was leading Salah in one of the masjids, and he was taking too long. And so because he was taking too long, people stopped coming to prayer for that reason. And the Prophet ﷺ got very angry. He said, so he became very, very angry, and he told them to shorten the prayers so you don't make it too hard on people. And then another example is he saw someone spitting in the masjid, and at that time they didn't have carpets, they had dirt, and so it was common for people to try to spit. And so he said, you shouldn't be spitting in the masjid, and if you do, make sure you do it to your left and you cover it with dirt. Don't do it in the direction of the Qibla. So he got very angry in that situation. So those are situations where the Prophet ﷺ got angry. He made sure he would always make dua for people when he got angry, and he made sure to give advice, and he didn't react hastily. And another example is also Aisha radiallahu anha, when she was upset, and this is kind of getting into another point we'll get into inshallah. When she got upset, the Prophet ﷺ said, I know when you get upset. And so she said, how do you know? Like, is this something revealed to you? And he says, no, when you get upset, you swear by the Lord of Ibrahim, but when you're happy with me, you swear by the Lord of Muhammad. And she says, you're right, when I'm angry, I might skip your name on my tongue, but it never gets skipped in my heart. And so that kind of is a really important point, because even when we're angry, and it's sometimes like in life, we will get angry over issues, over situations, but that should never disrupt the relationship and the love we have for each other, our families, our spouses, our brothers and sisters in Islam. We got to make sure we separate like the personal from the issues at hand, which is very important. And so, there's a lot more stories that are amazing, but just to keep it short, inshallah, kind of some points to prevent anger that are mentioned in hadith, is that, when you, for example, like, don't escalate the situation, just leave the conversation so you can think about it. Go to the masjid, which is a place of peace. Take a nap, which clears your mind. Make wudu, like the shaitan is extinguished with water. He's made, like, there's a hadith that says the shaitan is made from fire, so extinguish him with water. A lot of people say either make wudu or drink water. And then you can also change your position. The Prophet said, if you're standing, sit down. If you're sitting, lay down, connect to the earth. Those are ways to kind of clear your mind and kind of calm yourself. And also remember, like, anger spreads. So when you're angry with somebody, it doesn't just affect you or the person you're angry with, but it can affect everybody. And a very easy example of that is when parents, for example, fight. It doesn't just affect the two of them. It affects the children. It affects their parents. Right? Their parents, like the in-laws, might get involved and get really upset. It affects like the community potentially. It kind of has this trickle effect. So remember, when you're angry and you're not thinking rationally, it's not just, oh, I'm going to get back at that person. It's this poison is going to spread. That's something that's also very important to remember. And so if you become angry, make sure you seek forgiveness. But then you're also, if you're the recipient of anger, make sure that you are very forgiving. And there's a lot of different ayat in the Quran that go over this. I'm not going to get into all of them, inshallah. There's many, many ayats. You can talk to me after if you want to go over them. So anger is also an error of the shaitan. So the idea is like anger is this mechanism that shaitan uses to stop our growth. Anytime we're doing good, we're on the spiritual path, we're growing, like anger is just like this arrow that shaitan uses to bring us down. And there's this kind of like, we'll end with this concept where the Prophet ﷺ kind of, he spent a very long time between Dhuhr and Asr giving a lecture. Between Dhuhr and Asr, very long lecture, which is not typical for the Prophet ﷺ's lectures. And he was putting people in different categories, like the good and the bad of people. And one of the categories he mentioned was like some people, there are 4 kinds of people in the world. There are people who are slow to anger and slow to calm down when they become angry. There's people who are fast to anger and slow to calm down when they're angry. Then there's people who are slow to anger and are fast to calm down. And there's people who are fast to anger and fast to calm down. And he says the best amongst them is the person who's slow to anger and fast to calm down when they get angry. And he went on to give some examples in other areas of life. But the idea is like that the best person is someone who can control their anger, and when you're angry, like, you let it go. You don't let it just sit there and simmer for hours. And amongst the greatest jihad is the jihad against the self, and anger is probably one of the hardest places to practice that. And I think that's probably a good place to start ending it. So the idea, just to summarize, to prevent anger is like dua, dhikr, saying the bismillah and sending salams to each other, controlling your tongue and just like not talking when you're angry, and remembering that anger comes from weakness. So like children get angry, people who are weak get angry. Like don't go to that level of weakness. When you're angry, to cool down, say a'udhu billah, stay silent, control yourself, drink water, make wudu, change your position. And then when you're doing damage control, make sure that you be humble and apologize. Don't wait for someone else to like correct the mistake. You apologize. Seek help if you need it, professional help or help from family, whatever it is. Make dua for the other person you're angry with. Give sadaqah, do something nice for them. Those are ways to damage control. May Allah accept from us and allow us to not become angry, inshallah. Control our anger.